Alexander the Great, a name that has echoed through more than 2,000 years of human history. A conqueror, a visionary, a symbol of ambition and destiny. But who was he really? A hero who spread civilization across continents, or a ruthless warlord driven by pride and delusion? To understand Alexander, we must go back to a time before empires, before glory, when the seeds of greatness were first planted. The birth of a legend. It began in 356 BC, in the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, a rugged land north of Greece. That year, King Philip II received news of his son's birth on the same day he conquered a foreign city. The philosophers said it was an omen, that the child born that day would one day conquer the world. The boy was named Alexander. From the very start, his life was shaped by two powerful forces, his father, Philip, and his mother, Olympias. Philip was a warrior king, a brilliant tactician who turned Macedonia from a weak frontier state into a military powerhouse. Olympias, his mother, was a woman of deep passion and fierce ambition. She belonged to a mysterious religious cult and believed her son was destined for greatness. According to legend, she told young Alexander that his true father wasn't Philip, but Zeus, the king of the gods himself. To many, it was just myth, but to Alexander it became truth. He grew up believing he was not merely human, but chosen. The student of Aristotle. When Alexander was 13, King Philip brought in a tutor to shape the mind of his son, Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of the age. For several years, in a quiet grove called Mieza, the young prince studied under his guidance. Aristotle taught him science, literature, and philosophy, but also politics, ethics, and the art of leadership. From Aristotle, Alexander learned to think critically, to question the world, and to seek knowledge beyond borders. But Aristotle also planted another idea in his mind, that Greek culture was superior, and that it was a noble mission to spread it to the rest of the world. Alexander never forgot that lesson. In his spare moments, he studied the Iliad, the great epic of Homer. He admired the hero Achilles, whose courage and glory became his lifelong inspiration. From that point on, Alexander carried a copy of the Iliad wherever he went, a constant reminder of the destiny he was determined to fulfill. The rise of a young king. In 336 BC, tragedy struck Macedonia. King Philip II was assassinated, stabbed to death during a celebration, possibly by one of his own guards. He left behind a powerful army, an unfinished plan to invade Persia, and a 20-year-old heir. That heir was Alexander. Few believed the young prince could hold the kingdom together. He was brilliant, yes, but also hot-tempered, impulsive, and untested. But Alexander proved them all wrong. He moved quickly, silencing dissent and crushing rebellion. When the city of Thebes dared to revolt against him, Alexander made an example of it. He ordered the city destroyed, its people sold into slavery. It was a brutal act, but it sent a clear message to all of Greece. Alexander was not just Philip's son. He was his own kind of king. The dream of conquest. Once Greece was under control, Alexander turned his attention east, toward the greatest empire in the world, Persia. His father had dreamed of invading it, but never lived to see it happen. Now Alexander would take that dream and make it his own. In 334 BC, he set out across the sea with around 40,000 soldiers. At the age of 21, he crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait dividing Europe and Asia. Legend says he threw his spear into the ground upon landing and declared, "This land shall be conquered by the spear of Alexander." And with that, his conquest began. The first victories. His first test came at the Battle of the Granicus River. The Persian satraps, or governors, waited for him on the far side of the river, confident they could stop this young Macedonian. But Alexander did the unthinkable. He charged straight across the water with his cavalry, personally leading the attack. The Persians were caught off guard. The river turned red with blood. Alexander won. It was his first victory against the Persian Empire, and it set the tone for everything that followed. News of the young king's triumph spread quickly. To the Persians, he was no longer a reckless boy, or he was a threat. And to his men, he became something more than mortal, facing the great king. 2 years later, in 333 BC, Alexander met the Persian king Darius III in battle at Issus. The Persian army was massive, far larger than Alexander's, but numbers alone couldn't defeat his tactics. Alexander's army fought with perfect discipline, following his every command. In the chaos of battle, Alexander saw Darius in his chariot and led a direct charge at him. The Persian king panicked and fled the battlefield. The rest of his army soon followed. In one stunning victory, Alexander had shattered Persia's invincible image. He captured Darius's family, treated them with respect, and continued his advance through the empire. The Gordian Knot. During his march, Alexander reached the ancient city of Gordium. There he encountered a famous legend, the Gordian Knot, a tangled mass of rope said to be impossible to untie. According to prophecy, whoever unraveled it would rule all of Asia. Alexander examined the knot for a moment, then drew his sword and sliced it in half. To him, destiny wasn't a puzzle. It was something to be seized by force. It was a symbolic act that captured who Alexander was, bold, decisive, and utterly unwilling to accept limits. The fall of Persia. In 331 BC, the final showdown with Persia came at Gaugamela, in modern-day Iraq. Darius assembled an enormous army, war elephants, chariots, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Alexander's army was outnumbered nearly 5-1, yet his strategy was flawless. He feinted to one side, then attacked the center with his cavalry in a lightning strike. Once again, Darius fled. With that single victory, the Persian Empire collapsed. Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the heart of Persian power, all fell under Alexander's control. He had become the master of Asia. When he entered Persepolis, the Persian capital, Alexander allowed his soldiers to loot the city. Then, in a moment still debated by historians, he set it on fire, perhaps as revenge for Persia's ancient invasion of Greece. Either way, it was the symbolic end of an empire, and the beginning of a new one. Alexander in Egypt. From Persia, Alexander marched south into Egypt. There he was greeted not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The Egyptians, long oppressed by Persian rule, welcomed him as their savior. He visited the temple of the god Amun at Siwa Oasis. There, the priests hailed him as the son of Amun, the Egyptian equivalent of Zeus. Alexander accepted the title eagerly. It confirmed what he had always believed, that he was destined by the gods. Before leaving Egypt, he founded a new city on the Nile Delta, Alexandria. It would grow into one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, a center of science, art, and learning for centuries to come. The march to India. But Alexander's ambition knew no boundaries. With Persia under his control, he pushed further east, into lands no Greek had ever seen. He crossed deserts, rivers, and mountains, facing brutal heat, hunger, and disease. In 326 BC, he reached India, where he faced King Porus, ruler of a mighty kingdom on the banks of the Hydaspes River. Porus's army included fearsome war elephants, creatures Alexander's men had never encountered. The battle was long and bloody. Rain poured, the ground turned to mud, and the elephants charged through the Macedonian lines. But Alexander's strategy, quick movement, and relentless precision brought him victory once again. Impressed by Porus's courage, Alexander not only spared him, but made him an ally. For Alexander, it wasn't just about conquest. It was about building a vast, unified world under his rule. The limits of ambition. After years of endless marching and fighting, Alexander's soldiers were exhausted. At the Hyphasis River, they finally refused to go any farther. For the first time, Alexander faced rebellion, not from enemies, but from his own men. He tried to inspire them, begged them to push forward, but the army stood firm. With no choice, he turned back. The return journey was disastrous. Crossing the Gedrosian Desert, Alexander lost thousands of men to thirst and starvation. Even he barely survived. By the time he reached Babylon, the dream of conquering the entire world had faded. He was still young, just 32, but years of war and hardship had taken their toll. The mysterious death. In 323 BC, Alexander fell ill after a night of drinking and celebration. Within days, he was too weak to speak. His generals gathered around his bed and asked who would succeed him. Those were his final words. But some historians believe the story didn't end there. Greek accounts say his body did not decompose for days after his death, proof they thought that he was divine. Modern scientists suggest something more haunting, that Alexander may have suffered from a rare neurological disorder that left him paralyzed but conscious. If true, then the world's greatest conqueror was buried alive, trapped inside his own body. The legacy of Alexander. After his death, his empire fragmented. His generals, known as the Diadochi, divided it among themselves, creating kingdoms that would shape the ancient world for centuries. Yet Alexander's influence endured far beyond his lifetime. He founded over 70 cities, spread Greek language and culture across 3 continents, and opened the door to a new era, the Hellenistic Age. It was a time when Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian traditions blended, creating a vibrant world of art, science, and philosophy. Even his enemies admired him. Roman generals studied his tactics. Napoleon carried his image into battle, and his name became synonymous with greatness itself. The man behind the legend. Alexander the Great lived only 32 years, yet in that short time he changed the shape of the world forever. He was brilliant, fearless, and visionary, but also ruthless, impulsive, and consumed by ambition. He sought to unite the world, but in doing so, he left a trail of destruction behind him. Was he a hero or a tyrant? Perhaps both. But what cannot be denied is this. From the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of India, from Greece to Persia and beyond, the name Alexander the Great still commands awe. He was the boy who dreamed of glory, the king who conquered the world, and the man who became a legend.